So notes 1.4b, we're going to solve linear systems in 3 variables now.
Are you going to collect the page 26?
Not today. Write this down in your notes. 3 variable systems. So I'll give you some time. If you like to write while I read, I'll read slowly. So if you want to write as I read them, or if you like to look up, you can do that too. The first equation is 4x plus 2y plus 3z equals 12. The second equation is 2x minus 3y plus 5z equals negative 7. And the third equation is 6x minus y plus 4z equals negative 3. Okay, now, listen very carefully to what I have to say right now. These problems involve a lot of work. It's not always necessarily difficult work, but because there's so much work of sorts, it's important that we be organized. And for me to give you partial credit on quizzes or tests, I need you to be organized. It can get really crazy with 3 variables and 3 equations, and I need to be able to understand what you're doing. So we're going to use a method where we label the equations. Now we could label the equations any way we want. We could do 1, 2, 3. We could do A, B, C. I'm going to set you up just a little bit for something that you're going to see later in honors pre-calculus next year, and I'm going to call it R1, R2, R3. That's row 1, row 2, row 3. Okay, so let's label. R1, R2, R3. If you prefer a different labeling method, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, that's fine. Okay. It doesn't matter what you label them as long as they're labeled some way. Okay. Now, think about some of the things that we discussed on that very first slide, some options. I'll be real honest and say, unless it's set up like that very first one where Darby said, oh, I can see I could solve real quick here for y, I'm probably not going to use substitution. Most of the time when I solve a 3 variable system, I'm going to use elimination. Okay? So knowing that I prefer elimination, I want you to look at those 3 equations and try to decide, if we want to work smarter, not harder, is there a variable that would be best to eliminate? Jet, what's your answer? You had your hand up? And why would y be the best choice to eliminate, Jet?
Because in the bottom one it doesn't.
Yeah, in this bottom equation, it has a coefficient of 1, so that's an easy one to make it eliminate. Just multiply it by the number that you need the opposite of, right? Okay, so that'll be really nice and handy. Okay, so we're going to choose to eliminate y. And this is sort of the reason why there's so much more work involved in a 3 variable system. You can still only work with 2 equations at a time. So we're going to eliminate y in which 2 equations? We want to do R3 and I heard Rihanna said R2. So I'm going to do R3 and R2. In order for y to eliminate, what must I do to row 3? If I multiply it by 3, then it will also be negative 3. So then I have to multiply it by a negative 3. Okay. Now, I want to see this stuff in your work. the labels of which equations you used and what you decided to multiply by. Otherwise, when you just do the work and you don't write down what you did, oh my gosh, head explosion. I don't know what's happening. So really write down, be thoughtful about what you're doing. It'll help you and it'll help me. And we'll be able to find your errors faster. Okay, so now that we're confident y's are going to be opposites and we'll cancel, then we'll just go write the equation. So R2 we'll write as is. 2x minus 3y plus 5z equals negative 7. When you multiply R3 by negative 3, every single term gets multiplied by negative 3. So that's going to be negative 18x plus 3y minus 12z equals 9. Can you guys verify that I multiplied by negative 3 correctly? Okay. Can you imagine how terrible it will feel if you miss a negative sign? Sad day. Or when you do 3 times 3, you write 6.
Cool.
These are the small things that can come back to haunt us, okay? So we got to be really careful. All right. You got them written out? Now stack and add. 2x plus negative 18x. Negative 16x. Negative 3y plus 3y. Cancels, which is what we said we were going to do, right? 5z minus 12z. Negative 7z. And negative 7 plus 9. 2. Okay, so this one didn't work out quite as nicely as the one Annie gave us and Luke gave us where, another variable canceled out. So we actually have 2 variables remaining. Now, I would suggest you label this new one, if you want to call it like R5, or sorry, R4, I skipped a number.
We're adding this, right?
Yeah, you're adding down. It's stack and add. That's what I say when I do elimination, stack and add. So you can label it, if you want to call it now A and B when you label, whatever, I'm going to call it R4. It's my next row. Okay, it's a new equation. Okay, now think back to yesterday when Jet was trapped or, kidnapped by that evil king, and some people chose to solve and save him by using a system of equations. When we were trying to find the number of $5 bills and the number of $10 bills, we had 2 variables, x and y. So if you chose the system method, you needed 2 equations in order to be able to solve. We'll never be able to solve for x or z because there's 2 unknowns in one equation. So we need a second equation. Now we could use, someone else had said that before, R3 and R1. Now, super important thing to note. You must eliminate the same variable. So we eliminated y to make an equation with x and z. We want to eliminate y again to get another equation with x and z so that we could solve. If we eliminate z this time, then we'll have an equation with x and y and we can't solve that system. So we got to eliminate the same variable twice. What are we going to do to row 3 now?
Multiply by negative, or actually no, just multiply by 2.
Multiply it by 2. It is negative 1y. The row 1 has a y value of positive 2y, and we need them to cancel, so they got to be opposites. So let's just multiply by 2. And that's row 3. I'm going to pause momentarily. Is everybody okay how I'm making these decisions?
So now we're eliminating
We're eliminating y in the 2 equations, row 1, row 2, row 3. Yeah. So you eliminate y once, and then you eliminate y again using 2 different equations. But you'll have to reuse one of them. So you only have 3. Okay, so copy row 1. And multiply row 3 by 2. Make sure I do my math correct, because this would be super sad and disappointing if I got it wrong. If I get it wrong right there, then I'm not getting the right answer. Did I do that right? 12x minus 2y plus az equals negative 6? stack and add those. That'll give me 16x. Y's cancel. What is that? Plus 11z. And equals 6. And I'm going to call this row 5. Okay, so row 4 and row 5 are now a new 2-variable system. And these are like the ones that we looked at yesterday. You guys already know how to solve 2 variables. Elimination or substitution. I'll be real honest, I just keep it all elimination. So for those of you who really love substitution, you can do it. I think it's probably a little bit more work here because you have so much to write. I would maybe work on my elimination skills. What's really nice about our row 4 and row 5? The x's are set up to cancel already, right? Positive 16x and negative 16x. If that were not the case, we would have to like multiply row 5 or row 4 by something. But we're ready to just stack them and add them. Negative 16x minus 7z equals 2. 16x plus 11z equals 6. If nothing matched, I would multiply one equation by some number. Or match, but if nothing was opposite. In this case, when I stack and add, I'll get what? 4z equals 8. So z equals 2. And now I can find x. Okay, so we know z. Go back to row 4 or row 5, either one, okay, and plug your z in. Then the only thing unknown will be x. So you gotta go back to one of your 2-variable equations. I'm gonna plug into row 5. So I'm gonna do in row 5 over here, 16x plus 11 times 2 equals 6. That's 16x plus 22 equals 6. 16x equals 6 minus 22. Negative 16. So x equals negative 1. And if you plug that into R4, you should get the same answer of a negative 1. Okay, I'll move this up so you guys can see there in the back. Sorry. And now that I have z and x, how will I find y? Plug it into one of the original ones now. Okay, so instead of going to the 2-variable that only have x and z, now I gotta go up to a 3-variable equation so that I can get y. I'm gonna plug it into R3. Can somebody tell me what R3 is? It's off my page. But what was the original R3?
6x minus y plus 4z
Equals negative
3.
Okay, so I would plug mine into R3, and it doesn't matter which one you do. The only reason I like R3 is that if I'm solving for y, in the end I'll just have to flip the sign. I won't have to divide by a number if y had a coefficient. I mean, that's just me trying to do less work, if possible, but it wouldn't matter which one you choose. I'm going to sub in my numbers, so this is 6 times negative 1 minus y plus 4 times 2 equals negative 3. That gets me negative 6 minus y plus 8 equals negative 3. The negative 6 plus 8 is 2 equals negative 3. And then I have negative y equals negative 5. So y is 5. Now remember, your answer, instead of being written as an ordered pair, will be an ordered triple in the order x, y, z. So my answer here would be negative 1, 5, 2. And that ordered triple represents the x, y, z that if I plug those back into row 1 and row 2, they make all the equations equal. That was fun, wasn't it?
Actually,
It is actually like somewhat therapeutic if you don't mind algebra. You know, it's like, yes,
Just breaking it all down.
something to do when I'm feeling stressed,
No.
and I just need a little relief.
Just a little more.
Although if you can't get it, then it's more stress.
This is not a stress reliever.
Okay, now this is up to you. On the next slide, I wrote down kind of in words what we're doing. If you want to jot this down so you have something to refer to in your notes when you're trying to figure out what the heck is all this algebra mean? Okay, this is essentially what we do. Okay, to solve a system in 3 variables. We start by rewriting 2 original equations in 2 variables. That means you have to eliminate the same variable twice. So that was that part where we chose row 3. Jet chose it because it had a negative y, which would be real easy to multiply it by a number so that it would cancel out. And we eliminated it with row 3 and row 2, and then we did it again row 3 and row 1, and we made a 2 variable system. So really that first step is like the brand new piece. And you guys kind of came up with that even without me. You thought, well, try elimination and see what happens. Then you solve the 2 variable system. So that's algebra 1 information. You can use substitution. I'll be real honest and say I like to solve these with elimination. I think it's just a smoother process. Sometimes you end up with some kind of big numbers, and in substitution, that may mean like if you have coefficients that you would have fractions, not really nice. After you solve the 2 variable system, you will now know 2 variables. It could be x and y, it could be x and z, it could be y and z. That all depends on which variable you chose to eliminate in step 1. And then the last thing we did was we substituted those 2 variables back into one of our original equations so that we would find the final variable. So like we eliminated y in the beginning. That was the last variable that we found. We found x and z in the 2 variable system first. So we're going to start our homework. You have over 20 minutes. That's great so that you can work on some of these. They take a little bit longer, so we want to go ahead and get a head start on it. And we also want to practice our organization. And if you run into an error, then you can come up and ask about it, and we can try to find it, but I can only find it if you've been organized. Okay, otherwise I don't even want to look at it, right? Here's your homework assignment. It's page 34, numbers 1 through 10. The required problems are 5, 6, 9, and 10. And I'm just going to make a note right here.
Oh, great.
If you're working 7 and 8, do not be alarmed. There are fraction answers, and they are not nice.
Is there a book I can borrow?
Cross out the one from yesterday. So if you're looking at your notes or you're looking at your gold sheet, cross off yesterday's assignment and do today's. Okay, I said no homework yesterday. All right, hang on 1 second.
Wait,
I'm
could
going
you
to
go back
close.
one more slide? I just gotta write the last thing down.
Yeah, hang on.